Welcome, everyone. Glad you all are back, and hope you had a good lunch. We're going to begin this portion of the program with two extremely important awards, starting with the Smart Recovery Science Award. We established this award in 2018. Founding board member Hank Robb proposed the idea. The board enthusiastically supported it. We created it for two reasons. One was to recognize scientists who are researching the efficacy of SMART and mutual aid groups that use the self-empowering method that we do. The second point was by honoring those scientists, we hope to encourage a lot more research on these groups generally, so that the policymakers, professionals, and the public can better understand and use the type of mutual support that we provide. I think those of you who perhaps have looked at the research that's been done on mutual aid groups, you'll find that there, I guess up until recently, there hasn't been a whole lot. And we're trying to encourage a lot more of that, and this is one way we're doing that. And I think we're already seeing an increase in the kind of research, and we want to recognize the people who are doing that to encourage more and to make them appreciate the work that they're doing. The honoree is selected by a panel of scientists chaired by Hank. It also includes Joe Gerstein, Tom Horvath, who you saw earlier, Julie Utarian, who is our volunteer director of research at Smart Recovery, and previous recipients. So this year the panel included Sarah Zemore, who was the first recipient of this award, and her research found that AA, LifeRing, SMART, and Women for Sobriety are equally effective in helping people overcome addiction to alcohol, which was a very important finding, and one that I think is very, helps people understand SMART's effectiveness, and as well as the others. When we established the award, we knew that we'd have some catching up to do because there were people who have been researching SMART going back quite a few years. And so we had to catch up, I guess, in recognizing those who were among the first to perform research on SMART. And so this year, in fact, we are honoring the very first scientist to perform major research on SMART recovery. And that individual is Pat Penn. I will give you a little bit of background on her research and the impressive work she's done. Pat has devoted much of her career, spanning like 5 decades, exploring the challenges to help people with all kinds of situations or conditions: PTSD, sleep disorders, smoking addiction, victims of sexual abuse. Her body of research includes 150 papers and presentations going back to 1971. Given her broad focus, Pat's most distinguished research covers how to treat people with co-occurring addictions, or co-occurring conditions, I should say. And this is where she began researching SMART recovery through a 5-year study funded by the National Institute on Drug Abuse. It focused on people with a dual diagnosis of severe mental illness and a substance use disorder. It compared the use of people undergoing rational emotive behavioral therapy and SMART for mutual aid with people who were going through 12-step oriented treatment and mutual aid based on 12 steps. The study began, in fact, just as SMART was founded, and that was in 1974. And the results were published in the year 2000, and that was quite significant as a milestone. It did not compare the efficacy of SMART and 12-step meetings directly, but it focused on how they can help people facing the most formidable challenge of co-occurring mental health and addiction problems. And in our world, at least half the people with addictive problems are also struggling with mental health conditions. So I think that underscores how important this type of research is. The results, like Sarah Zemore's, found that both treatment and mutual aid combinations are equally effective. One key finding was that SMART's non-judgmental, empathetic, client-centered approach is effective. And Pat concluded that, quote, SMART is a promising new option for dual diagnosis treatment. And that finding was published in the Winter 2000 Journal of Rational, Emotive, and Cognitive Behavioral Therapy. This was the first major research study featuring SMART to be published in a prominent professional journal. She presented these findings on many platforms, including some of the most prestigious ones, which were meetings of the American Psychological Association. Over the years, she's performed additional research that reaffirmed these findings. Her most recent research was published in 2016 in the Journal of Groups in Addiction and Recovery, titled Co-Occurring Conditions, Clients and Counselors Compare 12-Step and SMART Recovery Mutual Help. In this study, it was a qualitative one based on interviews with participants and counselors talking about their experience with these two different mutual aid groups. And this was the first research in which dual diagnosis clients and counselors were interviewed about their combined experience with treatment and mutual support. And this study found, in fact, that clients regarded SMART as more helpful to some extent, and the counselors generally agreed with that finding. Pat has collaborated with many scientists, notably Emmett Velton, performed additional research on SMART, so in that way she's encouraged other scientists to investigate SMART, which is, I think, part of what we're trying to promote with this award. Pat and Emmett co-authored the book REBT for People with Co-Occurring Problems, Albert Ellis in the Wilds of Arizona. You might be able to get the book on Amazon, but there may not be too many ones left. At least last I found there was maybe one left. But this book uses case studies and transcripts from sessions led by Ellis to illustrate how REBT principles and tools used by SMART work. It's a semi-fictionalized to protect the privacy of the people involved. Ellis himself did not write the book. However, he closely reviewed the manuscript and wrote in the foreword that is one of the best books I've ever read about people with co-occurring problems of addiction and serious mental health and emotional disorders. The book combines humor and wisdom, such as this diamond in the rough, that a rendering of the Serenity Prayer that, as Ellis might have expressed it. I'm going to try to be a little bit careful in how I render this because Albert Ellis can be a little bit colorful in his language, as some of you may know. But the quote goes, "Let me seek acceptance of life as I find it, even though I may hate it like sin. The guts to kick, bleep, and change the things that I can change. The wisdom to live with the results the best I can, confident that what goes around comes around and the perpetrators will burn in hell." So anyway, I thought that was kind of appropriate and telling. Pat has received numerous awards for her work. If you look at her CV, it runs like 12 pages. It's extremely impressive, and she's done a lot of this work as Director of Research and Evaluation at the La Frontera, Arizona, a public behavioral health organization. Through her work and collaboration with professionals and peers in our community, Arizona has become a major center for SMART recovery innovation, research, and meetings. So today, I'm honored to add one more well-deserved honor to her mantle, bestowing the 2021 SMART Recovery Science Award to Pat Penn.
Good afternoon, everyone. I was very surprised and extremely happy to hear that I was receiving the SMART Recovery Science Award. Even though I can't be there, it's really special to me to be honored in this way. How I got into researching SMART recovery was serendipitous at several points. One was having a good friend who knew Emmett Belton. I ended up hiring him as the Smart Recovery consultant on my first study, which was funded by the National Institute on Drug Abuse. All of our studies were with people with co-occurring mental health and substance use conditions, usually, almost always, with additional challenges. And all of these studies were conducted at a community behavioral health center. Several of our studies compared smart recovery methods with using 12-step methods. Boiling those findings down a lot, here are some of those observations for our people with co-occurring challenges. Counselors working with co-occurring conditions felt that smart recovery was easier to use with people with co-occurring challenges because it could be applied to multiple problems. And people that learned smart recovery went on to apply it to a variety of problems. That was at 12-month follow-up. We found smart recovery easier and more suitable to use in early recovery because there's no abstinence requirement, among other things. And people with co-occurring conditions felt safer and more accepted at community SMART meetings compared to 12-step meetings, partly because there's a trained facilitator and other reasons. An unexpected finding was that several participants said that after using smart recovery, they could go on to use 12-step, but not before, and then they used both, which we thought was great, whatever works for them. And satisfaction with smart recovery was higher. We heard over and over from participants that they found that smart recovery was very empowering. As a result of our work, I, of course, grew to highly value and promote smart recovery, especially for people with co-occurring challenges. And I was happy to contribute to early research in these areas. Smart recovery's helped a lot of people, and I'm proud to be a part of that. Thank you again for this award. It means a lot to me.
The recipient of this award this year was the initiator of the Joseph Gerstein Award. I don't have anything to do with the selection of the recipient of this award. I just stand up here and award it. And many great purveyors and believers in smart recovery have gone before this year's awardee, Dr. Bill Abbott. Now, Bill Abbott, I guess, has been involved with smart recovery maybe 7 or 8 years, maybe longer. And he's an emeritus professor of vascular surgery from Harvard Medical School. He never had any problems with alcohol. I can tell you about his problems personally because he's very open about it. He never had any problems with alcohol during his medical career, which was illustrious. You will be well aware that professorships at Harvard Medical School don't come cheaply. Bill's CV that I happened to look up in conjunction with this award runs to over 200 papers, and he was president of several prestigious national societies. But after he retired and expected to just be putting his feet up and relaxing, he got into trouble with alcohol. And after 2 bouts of pancreatitis and a withdrawal seizure, his family insisted he be spending a month in a rehab. And the rehab happened to truck or van their patients who were interested in SMART to a meeting I was running in Leominster Hospital, and I guess the rest is history. Bill got deeply involved in SMART recovery. He's certainly run over 1,000 meetings since then. And his special accomplishment took place at the Emerson Hospital in Concord, Massachusetts, where he started a group which grew rapidly and became huge and caused us to start another group. His group was a Friday night group. It was obviously extremely popular. And despite the reputation of high-powered surgeons of being nasty and threatening and throwing scalpels and all that sort of thing. Bill was a magnificent, magnificent motivational interviewing type facilitator and attracted huge crowds to his meetings. So we had to start a Monday meeting, which we did. And then his meeting continued to grow. It outgrew the legitimate size again, got up over 30 people, and we started splitting it up. So the first 15 people would come in the main room, and then we were able to get another room, fill it up with another up to 15, 20 people. So then we had 3 meetings going, and then a meeting was started by the participants on Sunday that could take the some of the residents from the residential psychiatry program into it. And so there were 5 meetings running at this hospital. And then we arranged to get a smart representative, started with Bill, going into the IOP every other week, and then on the alternate week into the inpatient program to present smart recovery. This is what should be going on at every hospital in the country, really. But it doesn't, but eventually maybe we'll get there. And the groups have a real ecology. I call it the Emerson Hospital ecology. People are very involved. They do social events together, and they have discussion groups and coffee clutches on Saturday morning and things like that. And it all started with Bill. Now, at one point, Bill and his, at that point, co-facilitator, Jane Gordy, were concerned, as we all are, about the dropout rate of people after their first smart recovery meeting. This is quite common, and they decided to do a study to assess whether they could affect this rate somehow. And they decided that on alternate weeks, they would either ask new attendees to come up and meet them after the meeting, or on the other alternate week, not do that. And here it was a great control study because you had a male facilitator and a female facilitator. So they did this for 6 months, and they found out that there was a significant enhancement of attendance by people who had been requested and who had agreed to come up and talk to the facilitator after the meeting. And they, at that meeting, they just basically shook hands, and those were the old days, huh? Shook hands, and then, you know, said, what did you get out of the meeting, and how did it go, and did you like the program, and so forth. And not surprisingly, I guess, more of those people, significantly, 6 months was long enough to test it, came to the meeting. So I encourage all of you to do the same thing. Maybe even if it's on Zoom, they'll ask the person to hang around and have a little talk with them and see what they got out of the meeting and what their interests are and so forth. Okay, so Bill has recently had heart surgery. He had 3 years where he wasn't feeling well, but I'm happy to report he called me 2 days after his surgery and said he was feeling great again. Remarkable to know that 2 days is all it takes to replace your valve. Is with great admiration. Incidentally, Bill lives a mile from the house that I used to live in when I lived in Boston. We never knew each other, never met each other, even though we were only 1 mile apart and both in the medical field. And since then, we've been great friends and colleagues, and I love him dearly, and I'm so happy that he has been honored in this way. Here's his trophy.
Thank you all very much for the honor and of this award, the Joe Gerstein Award for Smart Recovery. I was particularly pleased to receive it, although I had, over the course of my time being active with SMART, really worked very hard to to hopefully live up to the expectations of an awardee. And I guess that is enough said about that. But a little story is how I got involved with all of this is that in the middle of Massachusetts, a town known as Leominster, I happened to be able to attend when I was in myself in rehab, a SMART meeting in Leominster, Massachusetts. We walked into the room and the facilitator there was an elderly guy with a beard and glasses. And he started talking about SMART and recovery and cognitive things. And I'm a retired surgeon. I'd never heard any of this stuff before. So I said, listen for a few minutes. And I started to smile and said, well, boy, this really makes sense. And it continued to make sense. And the more I learned, the more sense it made. So when I got back home, I started with a local meeting, and pretty soon I was facilitating that meeting. And of course, the bearded guy in Leominster was Joe, and Joe Gerstein. And he turns out to be one remarkable individual with whom I'm very fortunate to remain friends, close friends to this day, in spite of the fact that he's moved to Florida, but we still communicate regularly. And the things that he sort of represents and made as contributions, I really think are the gist of the importance of this program. And there's one thing that's said, it's a slogan, I don't know, it's discover the power of choice. And those very few words really say it all. And I think that the empowerment that this sort of program will allow people, if they choose to do it, and are then provided the tools and the necessary information to do it, will make the difference. And it will make it in a way that will stick. That whereas if somebody else is doing it, and I'm not demeaning other means, but if you are doing it yourself, you have achieved it, you can receive yourself sort of congratulation or the good feelings of saying it was tough, but I did it. And to me, that is discovering the power of choice. So again, I thank you very much. I'll be with you in spirit, and let's just get this thing done. Thank you.